Welcome to the Jackson Rudolph podcast. I'm your host, Jackson Rudolph, and this is episode 17. And today we have a really special interview with three people that are very special to me. These are all executives of Paul Mitchell and Team Paul Mitchell Karate. Today we have special guests, Julie Solwold, Chris Rappold, and Kalena Nordgaarden. And I'm going to start by having them go ahead and introduce themselves to you guys a little bit.
Please first. Hi, friends. This is Kalena Nordgaarden, and I am the Lifestyle Marketing Manager for John Paul Mitchell Systems, which means I get to work with all these fabulous, amazing athletes and partners in the events world, including our wonderful Jackson Rudolph of Team Paul Mitchell Karate.
Thank you.
I'm Julie Solwold. I happen to right now be in charge of corporate communication and sustainability for John Paul Mitchell Systems, looking to make sure that we are a good corporate steward of the earth. And I'm relevant to this podcast because I actually started the sports marketing department with a gentleman 30 years ago at John Paul Mitchell Systems. And the first team that we ever sponsored was the martial arts team, the Team Paul Mitchell Karate. And that was over 30 years ago. And I've been fortunate to be with the company almost that long, so for 29 years from nearly the beginning. And so I have a lot of history to add to this podcast. If anyone dares ask any questions, I know where all the skeletons in the closet are. I know the good, the bad, and the ugly, and it is phenomenally good. So.
And I am Chris Rappold, and I am Jackson Rudolph's bow staff instructor. Though not really. I'm the executive director of Team Paul Mitchell Karate, and I'm proud to say I've been with the team since the end of year one, so I have a long history as well with the team.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you guys very much for that introduction. And one of the things that I want to get into right away is how each of you first got involved with Team Paul Mitchell Karate, and then kind of as you're telling that story, giving us a brief history of Team Paul Mitchell. So maybe with Julie and Chris taking us back to the beginning, what it was like when that sponsorship was first secured. Obviously, Chris, you have the unique perspective of being both a competitor at one point, now an executive. So everybody kind of going over how you first got involved with Paul Mitchell, but at the same time trying to give a brief history of how all of this got started.
All right, I think, let me go first and make some comments, and Jackson, if you have any questions. But the Paul Mitchell team originally started off as the Spider Brand team, and there was a local team made up of, some of the best regional competitors out of New England. And as the story goes, the Spider Brand team kind of went defunct, and the sponsor was not able to fulfill his obligations. So Coach Don Rodriguez and Steve Babcock got together, and they were, wondering, geez, what do we do with the team now? And, Coach Steve said, well, I know this guy that I used to rent from out in California. I know he has a company. I don't know if he'd be interested in sponsoring. And that was really the birth of our team. I came on at the end of the year. At the time, I was fortunate. I had the number one spot in the country as a fighter, and Coach Steve says that I beat him at a tournament. Now, I don't ever remember us fighting at a tournament, but I think I had done pretty well against the current members of the team at the time. So, with my ranking and the fact that we were all kind of from the same area, they picked me up, and I've been on it ever since.
And what year was that?
That was,
89?
Boy, 89, 88 or 89, yeah. And then, we had that, and that was really wonderful. It was a very special time, and the person that we knew who as the face of Paul Mitchell was, of course, John Paul, and another gentleman. His name was Brooks Parsons, and he was the first person that kind of became the link between us and the company. And then about 5 years later into the relationship, along came Julie Solwold. So I'll let her take it from there.
Sure. And for those of you who might not know who John Paul is, that Chris referenced, that John Paul is John Paul DeJoria, and he is the co-founder of John Paul Mitchell Systems, the hair care company, the privately owned hair care company that makes Paul Mitchell hair care, along with Mitch, Maverick, and a number of other professional salon lines. And like Chris had said, Steve had rented from John Paul. And John Paul Mitchell Systems started in 1980, and so it was doing quite well at the time. And Steve came up to John Paul and talked to him about sponsoring a team. And what JP loved about the martial arts is he looked at the foundation of the martial arts, the values that the martial arts are built on: honor, integrity, discipline, respect, everything good. And those were the cornerstone of what he built John Paul Mitchell Systems upon as well. So in 1989, Paul Mitchell, the co-founder, the artist, had passed away of pancreatic cancer. So this gave John Paul an opportunity to partner with a sport that basically married the values that John Paul Mitchell Systems had, and get the product looked at as something different other than like a beauty product. It was a lifestyle product. It supported people's passions. It supported activities that were family friendly. He loved what the martial arts did for children, especially. So it was a really nice partnership there, in that you had a team of predominantly fighters, and then you had Christine Van Rodriguez on there too as the woman on that team when it first started. So it did start primarily with fighters, and gradually as we got more and more engaged and involved personally with it, increased a little bit more of the forms portion to it, and ultimately had a balance to where it was very, pretty even fighting in forms. And as we created a phenomenal forms team, we were kind of marrying and following where society was going in general with a little more extreme sports. So it has been a legacy for me since 1992. So I came shortly after Chris came on board. So it's a wonderful history of supporting the martial arts, supporting those values, and watching where that sport has taken people, participants.
Absolutely.
And then this is Kalena.
So, Chris and Jules mentioned Brooks Parsons. So Brooks and Jules really built a beautiful department, the sports marketing department at John Paul Mitchell Systems. And within that department came Team Paul Mitchell Karate. And so Jules and Brooks, with the support of, JP and Angus and Paul, built this team. I came in, I happened to be Julie's daughter. So when Julie started working at JPMS in 1992, and she started working all these sports events, she would bring me along. That's how she babysat me. So I was at, beach volleyball events and karate events and ski events as a little kid, on site, handing out samples and being a part of that activation in that sense. And so I remember going to the karate tournaments and meeting our team members as a small child. But Julie was the one working those events. Fast forward, 15 years. I was working events as well as an independent contractor for JPMS, but I never worked the karate events. Those were always special to Julie and like her other child, her other baby. So I was the other events, but she would always make sure to work the karate events. So after graduating college, luckily I was hired on full-time at JPMS, and I was working in the sports marketing department with Julie. So she and I were working on all these events together. Still, she was working all the karate events and I was working the other ones. And then as Julie's role within the company and the department changed, she started looping me into the fold and bringing me to the tournaments. And I got to meet the team and, former members, current members, and just really learn about sport karate. Even though, it already had this beautiful foundation. Everything was already established. So it was, the benefit to me of, okay, Julie, handed off the team. Here you go. Now you're in charge. And everything was, running smoothly. So that's sort of my foray into the team. And I honestly, right now, currently, I just call myself a glorified cheerleader. I get to go to and, I'm Team Paul Mitchell's biggest fan. At some of the events we go to, we do have an on-site activation that I facilitate as well, where we do bring in our local stylists or schools to do here, but first and foremost, I'm here for the team. I'm here to, take JPMS goals and initiatives and bring them to the team, and we try to execute together and support each other.
Absolutely. I mean, I can definitely vouch for the fact that Kalena is definitely a professional cheerleader when it comes to the karate tournaments. We always hear her voice out there when we're competing. And thank you all for sharing that. I think that provides a unique perspective of you guys' roles and of the history that a lot of people, especially in the world of sport karate, never have the opportunity to learn about. And so I think that's a really cool perspective that I want our viewers to kind of carry with us as we go through some more of these stories that you guys tell and experiences that you share. And I want to hit on something that Julie was saying about how much karate in general, martial arts in general, was in line with what John Paul DeJoria saw for his company and the type of product and the type of company that he wanted to have. And one thing that I've always been impressed with is how involved he's been considering who he is. He's a celebrity, you know what I mean? He's been in movies before, and, he's a billionaire. And the fact that he has come to martial arts events before is crazy to me. Like, I still remember not being on Team Paul Mitchell and him coming to the Lone Star Open, and then me feeling like, man, like, this is my opportunity to impress the guy, you know what I mean? And then later on in my career, one of my favorite memories being on Paul Mitchell is the breakfast that we had with John Paul DeJoria in Vegas when he talked with us all a little bit and shared some of his stories, and that was just such a cool experience. So one thing that I want to get, especially from Julie and Kalena, as you guys have spent the most time with him, talk about working closely with someone so generous, all of the work that he does for charity and all these great foundations that he works with, someone so accomplished as he is. What's it like to work so closely with somebody like that? And then maybe everybody can share their favorite JP story.
I'll start with that just because I've been with the company 29, almost 30 years. And so I have a nearly 30-year history of working, directly with him. Again, it's a privately owned company. And so basically, if there's something that John Paul likes, in all probability, we get to do it because he doesn't have to answer to a board of directors. He doesn't have to answer to shareholders. If he believes in something, if he believes it's the right thing to do and a good thing to do, he allows his employees the freedom to do those things. And that's been the beauty of the karate team and the martial arts team. And I think that's also why this team always tries to give something back to the community that they're in. They do it as individuals and they do it as a team. When they go to the tournaments, they'll visit hospitals, they'll do demos at schools. And that's just because for the time from the beginning, John Paul has always talked about success unshared is failure. That's his favorite motto. Is if you cannot be successful unless you share the gifts that you have been that you have earned, that you've worked for, and that you've been given. And so it's a 30-year legacy history of giving back every day. It's not something we recently made up. It's not something that is disingenuous and we just do it when people are looking. You're right. He gives back all the time. And so the love and the passion that we have to serve people and serve the community comes directly from John Paul as a leader. And I've had, like I said, I've been blessed to be with him almost 30 years. I know Kalena has been 12, 13 years. That same ethos touches her as closely as it does me. He's that way with every one of his employees, and he truly loves and enjoys every one of us as individuals. And when it comes to the karate team, he's like a little kid when he watches them. It's like he sees. Oh, by the way, he's a phenomenal gymnast. He did gymnastics, and he can still do. What is it? The flange where you like. Plank. Well, it's a plank. You on your hands and your feet are out, and you're balancing on your hands. Wow. He does that to this day. I can't do that. He loves watching the competitors, and it's like he's like a little kid when he discovers something like amazing. He goes, "Oh, they're amazing! Did you see what he did? Did you see what he did?" So he truly takes such joy in watching what these competitors do, and he never thinks that he helped create that ever. That never enters his mind. it's a beautiful sport that he looks at, and he gets such joy from watching people do what they love to do in competing, and just shining so phenomenally at it. And that is that legacy that comes from him for daily.
Kalena, just echoing Julie's sentiment, our favorite quote, well, at least my favorite quote from John Paul is, success unshared is failure. And that enthusiasm, that belief of giving back to your community comes from John Paul, but it also comes from the top down of the company. It's John Paul, it's his daughter, Michaeline, who's co-chair. It's, Jason, who's our COO. I love it. It's company wide, that mindset, that philosophy. And Jackson, something you said that made me giggle is when you were talking about when you saw JP at a tournament, when you were on the team, and he's a celebrity, he's been in movies, he's done this, he's done that. I forget about that aspect, and that's, some people do look at him as a celebrity. I don't. I work for him, and so I'm used to seeing him and used to being around his wonderful open heart, and so I forget that he's kind of a big deal in some people's eyes. He's a big deal in my eyes, but celebrity is a word that doesn't pop into my head right away. And it doesn't. I don't think it does for a lot of people, because he is just so humble and natural, and like what you see on TV, that's how he is in person. He is this outgoing, enthusiastic, smart, supportive, philanthropic man. And I love that about him, and I love that he believes so deeply in leaving this world a better place for future generations. So he's going to support things now that
build character.
Yeah, build character that set the next generations up for success, both physically, mentally, spiritually, all of it.
Yeah, those are both beautiful sentiments to John Paul, and I mean it's in line with all of my experience with him. You know what I mean? I remember when our coaching staff had us watch the movie Good Fortune, which was released in 2016, that I highly recommend anybody watch, and that just gives you a glimpse into some of the work that he's done. And yeah, hearing it directly from you guys is just super special. So maybe now, Chris, do you have maybe a favorite John Paul story that you'd want to share?
My first exposure to John Paul was Coach Steve and I went. He had a very beautiful home in Rhode Island, and again at the time I think I was 18 or 19 years old, and the home, I want to say, had 18 bedrooms. I walked in, and I was standing on a little oriental carpet that was worth $40,000, and he spent at that time, about $500,000 on the drapes, as I recall. But I only say that to say the second piece of it. I think I've admired him for as long as I've known him, because he is super successful, but he's also so approachable, and that's very unique to his personality. I don't, at least from my perspective, he's never lost the human touch, and I've never felt that he never puts on any airs, and I've always enjoyed my time with him. My first exposure again was that party that we went to, and there were judges and celebrities and different people there, and he was as plain as they could be, and at that time that was probably the most elaborate barbecue spread I had ever been to. And then another time that we all met in New York City at the Plaza Hotel, and
is that where that photo was from?
Yeah, and that was wonderful. And he said without batting an eye, or he said it for not to name drop or anything. He says, "Oh, I think I'll see if Ivanka's home, and maybe she can come down and have lunch with us." Ivanka Trump at the time, and but he just so enjoyed all of his time with us. I remember one time we brought him a T-shirt. I think it was the 20th anniversary. And, we're in the middle of the restaurant, and he whips his shirt right off.
That's a scary thought.
Yeah, he whips his shirt right off just so he could put the shirt on that we got him. The little small little things like that he does, that he just really embodies that ideal that, I think certainly that ideal that I aspire to. and he's always been that vision. Yeah,
absolutely. And as an athlete, competing and wearing, his brand on my back is something that, like, knowing the type of character that he has and the type of person that he is and the type of work that he does, it makes me feel that much better and that much more proud as somebody representing that brand, as somebody that in whatever small part that I can promotes not just the company, but the essence of what John Paul is and all the work that he's done. That's something that's very special. And now I want to kind of shift and focus our conversation a little bit more on the karate team in particular. Chris, you just mentioned the 20th anniversary. Julie's mentioned several times a 30-year history. So JPM has certainly stood the test of time, becoming the longest sponsored sport karate team by a significant margin. And at the same time, being successful for the vast majority of that time. I mean, Coach Rodriguez refers to us as the Yankees of sport karate because of how not just, our run and how long it's been, but also how decorated our resume as a team is. And so a question for all of you is, what are the attributes of our team, of our culture that have made this possible? Whether that's anecdotes about particular moments where you kind of realized how good we were or realized how long it had been, or just kind of overall thoughts about some of the things that contributed to that type of a run and the fact that it's still going. What makes that possible?
It's Julie. I'm going to pop in real quick, here, because I want to give credit where credit is due on this team. In that it was started by Steve Babcock and Coach Don Rodriguez, and they did everything for the team for a number of years, and then it was the three of us who did everything for the team for a number of years, and I think the three of us, whatever, we were finally smart enough to know that we honestly. We could serve the team better if we brought in people who were smarter than us in a lot of areas. And Jackson, that's when we created the executive team. That team has not been around forever. That's that 5-person team that actually runs the team, and kind of stepped back more. But Coach and Steve were basically the general manager and the lead coach, and then Chris was brought on as the executive director because of his business skills and his knowledge of the martial arts industry, and he's so widely respected in the martial arts industry, and always as a founding member of Team Paul Mitchell, he was the perfect person to be the organized, structured one. Then we have Damon Gilbert, who was brought on as a fighting coach, and Lauren Carney, who was brought on as a forms coach, because as the sport matured as a whole, specialties became more important for the competitors. So it no longer was, oh yeah, I do, forms, weapons, fighting, everything. It's like, to be really good, because the sport itself was getting so much more sophisticated, you almost kind of had to specialize. And so we had to make sure that we had the people in place who could teach, watch, coach, mentor, guide throughout the way the sport was changing. And then we also needed somebody who could be the centerpiece for Team Paul Mitchell to create structure, organization, communication, which was the most important thing, so everyone felt like they were a team. This kind of goes back to what makes us a team. It's that thought process that it's about, the we, not about the me. And every competitor that was ever scouted, because it was scouting. It was scouting by Coach, by Steve, by Lauren, by Damon, by Chris. And they all had to agree that whoever they were scouting was worthy of being on the team. And that meant that it wasn't necessarily how good they were, because if they were a phenomenal fighter or forms person, but they didn't have a good heart or soul, they wouldn't make it on the team. They could have been the best in their craft, but if they didn't have the right character, they were not invited to be a part of the team. And that came from that executive leadership team of 5 people. And the smartest thing we ever did was create that team, because that allowed the team to succeed, because you had the smartest people in the world of sport karate selecting the best things for John Paul Mitchell systems, which I just happened to be a conduit to. I was nothing more than a conduit at that time. So we can thank the executive team for bringing the most, the people, heart, soul to the team. And of course, Jackson, that all absolutely includes you. And that is like, we're so blessed when you accepted.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It means the world to me, not only to represent a team that has that type of rigor, if you will, to their selection process, and to be somebody that was selected through that process is something that I hold dear to my heart. As most members of Team Paul Mitchell, I cried when I got the call to be on the team, and there's a reason that members of the team have that emotion when they first get accepted, because I know I'm not the only one to cry when I got the call. It's just something that's so special because you know how much it means. So now open it up, Chris, Kalena, any additional thoughts about what makes all this possible, the longevity and the success?
I'm so fortunate that Julie and Brooks and JP, the foundation for greatness was laid for me. And I just got to walk in after the hard part was done. The groundwork was already laid for me with the team. But now we're in a really interesting time where the sport's changing, and I'm really excited to see where it goes and how it evolves, and work on that together with the board and with current players and what have you. Something that popped into my head during Julie's explanation was the executive board. It hasn't been in place for the entire time the team has been in place, so she gave a great description of how the board has come together to recruit and make sure that people that are invited to be a part of the team fit. But what did we do before that? How did we come to that greatness? What is it that Coach and Steve were doing beforehand to make sure we were getting the best of the best? And I'm sure it's very similar to what they do now, but we didn't have the board before. So I'm curious. I'm just learning. I'm asking these questions and learning about, okay, well, what was it like and why? Yeah, we were so awesome from the beginning. These, Coach and Steve were great on their own. Late 80s, early 90s. They were the best on their own. And then with Spider going away and JPM coming in and being able to support, the stars aligned perfectly on that one for us, because it's 33 years strong, and we're still the best of the best. I'm loving learning as I'm more involved with the team. I'm loving just picking Coach's brain and finding out, what was it like back then and how did it work back then, so that we can build and keep that greatness going for the next 33 plus years.
But I would echo something that Kalena said. She said she came in and she started on the shoulders of Julie and Brooks and JP, and I would say the same thing in my case. Certainly of the people she named, but then also it's Coach and Steve, because that was I had the most face time with them, and the foundation that they laid was very strong. Julie commented earlier about the character of the team, and that's something that I think Coach and Steve intuitively had a good sense of. But that's not to say that people that aren't on our team are in some way, and that are equal, if not, better than us at times at, performance or fighting or whatever. It doesn't mean that they're at all bad people, but, this is an individual activity, but because of Team Paul Mitchell sponsorship, you have to find somebody that has the DNA to put we above me. And that, unfortunately, or, fortunately, however you look at it, that will disqualify some people that, really, they shine as a superstar, but they're not going to be successful, as a team member. And I go back to, a very early example of Steve Babcock putting, Richard Plowden and Anthony Price and Terry Kramer on, Team Paul Mitchell. I mean, those were all his greatest, adversaries at the time. So, that's such a, an amazing example. When there was the decision about putting Kevin Thompson on the team, Pedro, that was his rival. He said, absolutely, if we can get Kevin. Not everybody would make those kind of decisions. So I think when we talk about character, I think the we not me is a huge piece of of what it is that they look for. It's a given that the person has to be a talent, but then they have to have the mindset and the DNA to be able to excel in that environment.
Absolutely, and it's crazy to reflect. I mentioned briefly the success record that Paul Mitchell has had, but I think a lot of it comes down to, look at who we've been able to recruit onto this team. Essentially having Pedro Xavier and Kevin Thompson on the same team fighting team at one point would be the equivalent of Magic Johnson and Larry Bird playing for the same basketball team. Like, that just didn't happen. And so it's incredible that Paul Mitchell's been able to do that. And Chris, I want to go a little bit further with you, talking about how you were both a competitor for Paul Mitchell first, and then later made the switch to being an executive, which is something that a lot of our executive members have done. But talk a little bit about the change in perspective, what it was like to be a member of the team, and then what it was like to be one of the leaders of the team. Maybe even if that was a shift that happened while you were competing, you kind of became a leader among the players, and then ultimately being an executive. Just kind of talk about that changing perspective for you.
Well, I think I competed, and I was like you, Jackson, and others on the team. I was fortunate to have a level of success in sport karate, and then I retired. I retired from the team, and I did not compete for 12 years. And then when I came back, of course. I was 37 years old, and the median age on the team was 20. So because the people that were on the team knew of me because I was one of the founding members, I think I had some built-in credibility with them, which certainly helped. And then in 2011, I won my World Championship in Dublin, Ireland, and came out completely unscathed. And then 6 weeks later, I was playing pickup basketball, and I broke my wrist. Competitive pickup men's basketball. My second time doing it, and I broke my wrist, and I took that as God's way of saying, okay, enough. But the privilege that, Julie gave me, asking me to be part of the executive committee, was that I would still be able to follow my passion and enjoy the people that I love so much, and be a part of kind of paying back, really, of everything that I was given from John Paul from such a young age. I never would have, I wasn't destitute in any sort of way at all, but I could have never traveled the world, when I was in college the way that I did, and have those type of experiences. So because I started, and I had such a depth of pride seeing it from the beginning, and also because I had such a reverence, for, particularly Coach, and certainly Steve as well, but of what I felt Paul Mitchell stood for, it gave me an opportunity to ensure that, the next generation would embody some of those things that we all strive for. But of course, at that time, it's a different generation. It's a mindset. It's a different group of people. And but how can we still, have those foundational principles be a part, as we go into the now 33rd year?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I still remember that second resurgence of your career in that 2009 to 2011 timeframe, I think it was a lot of fun to watch, because I actually wasn't on the team at that time, but obviously I was a huge fan of Team Paul Mitchell as somebody that ultimately wanted to be on the team. And I still remember, you being that age and going on stage at US Open and doing team fights against All-Stars. I don't remember who you were fighting, but you landed a defensive sidekick on somebody, and then kind of walked over to the corner of the stage yelling and everything, and it was just awesome to be able to see you be able to maintain that level, and contribute to the team in that way, on that kind of second career, as you noted, which was really cool as just a fan of Paul Mitchell to see.
Thank you, Jackson. And that's really, I'm honored that you remember that.
So Jackson, do you remember stuff like that from that year? I don't know what I had for lunch yesterday. And you remember 2009 or 10 or 11 or something? That is phenomenal.
I mean, it's something that I pride myself on. You know, I consider myself a sport karate historian, even though I obviously haven't been around for the entirety of sport karate history. I try to look back using the YouTube videos and the sport martial arts archives and things like that. And I hold great value in those that came before me as competitors. I learn a lot going back and watching fighters as well for mentality and how they carried themselves, and then obviously watching forms competitors and what techniques were they doing, what was special about the way they performed, how did they own the ring. And it's a big part of my game is trying to implement things that I've noticed that other great competitors have done, whether it's performance or technical things or any of that. It's something that I try to replicate, not only in my performances but in my demeanor outside of the ring, the ways that I carry myself on social media, things like that. I base all of that on what I've seen to be successful from, in particular, former Paul Mitchell members, because for 33 years that has been the standard of greatness in our sport. And so, thank you for the compliment. But it's something that I work very hard to ensure that I have is that knowledge basis and to remember those moments, and also just because I have such a passion for the team. Like, it's easy to remember, Chris Rappold hitting a defensive sidekick on All Stars, or it's easy to remember Zolt winning an Irish Open over guys who will not be named that fought for All Stars and things like that, right? Like, those are the things that, like, as a fan of this team, I remember so vividly. But shifting a little bit, because I don't want to talk about me too much. So go ahead, sorry.
By all means do, because you're pretty darn amazing.
Thank you very much. But anyway, so you all get seen at tournaments all the time now. Julie, you've since kind of passed the torch on to Kalena some, but even you were still at Compete Nationals, which we were very happy to see. But you all get seen at tournaments, and anybody that knows who you guys are, which a fair percentage of the sport karate population does, they automatically step up their game, or at least this is what I did. Like, you automatically step up your game because the Paul Mitchell guys are watching, and you guys could be scouting, right? And so, kind of two-pronged question here for everybody. First off, just give our audience a little bit better sense of what your specific roles are when you are at a tournament. What are you doing? What are you focusing on the most? What is most of your time dedicated towards? And then also in terms of scouting, because that's what so many, we've got a lot of listeners of the podcast that are young competitors or parents of young competitors. And so many people wonder, what does it take? So when you are in that scouting mode, what are some of the things that you're looking for? Which you've alluded to some of that already, but maybe unpack that a bit more.
Sure. This is Kalena. Tackling your question about sort of what is your role when you're at events. So it can be two-pronged to it. First and foremost, I'm there, as the face of JPMS, and to represent the company and the team and support the team in any way, shape, or form. I'm there for you. I'm there for JPM team members. I'm also there to connect with the team members, and before, after our events, we'll do team meetings and talk about just different things. But making sure I extend any messaging from JPMS leadership or whatever we're working on in the company, I get to share that with you so we can tackle it together. If there's a goal or something that we're working on corporately, I'll share it with you. So okay, great, we are going to use this new hashtag or, whatever campaign we're working on, that kind of thing. Yeah, the philanthropic efforts, Earth Day coming up is a great example. We're going to plant trees together on Earth Day. But sharing that corporate messaging with the team members whilst cheerleading and supporting, that's part of it. And then another part of my job is at the events where we do have an on-site activation. That means, at the U.S. Open, at Coaches Tournament, at the Battle of Atlanta, a number of different tournaments, we set up a mobile salon, if you will. We have tables, chairs set up where we invite guests, whether they're a competitor or just an attendee. We do their hair for free. We recruit local salons or Paul Mitchell schools. We get stylists. They volunteer their time and they come into the event and they'll, do braids. They'll do mohawks. They'll just, style people up for fun. And we're sampling products and handing out products to just, educate people on what Paul Mitchell is and where they can get those products. Because remember, JPMS is a professional salon company, so we only sell in salons, Paul Mitchell schools, beauty supply stores. Now you can buy our stuff online, but educating the general consumer about Paul Mitchell is part of the job. That's why I have a job, frankly. Yeah, I get to bring our professional products into the consumer world, if you will. So that's what Kalena's job is in a nutshell when she's at the events. Scouting is not so much my job. It's I'm unknowingly doing, honestly, because I'm newer to this world. I've been coming to tournaments regularly now for 5 or 6 years. And just learning. I ask so many questions at every tournament. I'm trying to soak up and learn and understand the sport. And naturally, when I just kind of walk around and I'll look, I want to see different people and learn the different divisions and disciplines. And so scouting for me I don't consider what I do. It's not scouting. It's just, I'm just trying to learn. Definitely my eye. I'm not sure what it is about them, but they're, it's their attitude, their enthusiasm, their performance. It's kind of the whole package. I'm just looking for people who are crushing their discipline and have a smile on their face, whether they drop or not. Whether they win or lose, what is their attitude like? So I'm kind of I just keep my eyes peeled for all of that. And I really enjoy doing that. It's just fun. It's fun to learn about this. I'm like JP too. I'm like a little kid when I watch this stuff. It's so exciting. So for me, I don't consider what I'm doing. I'm not scouting. I'm not trying to find the next superstar. That is the job of our executive board and Steve and Damon and Chris and LK. That's, I like being a part of that conversation. But I think it's most important, like Jules is sitting here next to me nodding her head, like, yeah, it's about your attitude, whether you win or lose. What's your attitude? What's your demeanor? Because you can always teach someone a skill. Some people have that natural athletic talent. You can teach that to somebody. You can't teach someone to have a great attitude.
Or to be a good person.
Yeah, to have that character. So, yes, we want people who are going to do great and win their division, but we want people who have that wonderful character and that optimistic attitude and then can be a team player. We need that beautiful combination. Yeah. So from my perspective, when I'm quote unquote scouting or just watching, that's what I'm looking for, is just good attitude, great athleticism.
Yeah, and I think a part of that, this is Julie popping in there, I think a part of that is the executive team. Lauren is phenomenal at forms. Damon is incredible at fighting. And so when they may have people in mind and they may give us, and it used to be me, it's no longer me, they may say, look, we're looking at blah, yada, 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 and yada, 3 or 4 people. And then what I would do in the past is, with that, I would just quietly go about and watch each of them compete and watch how they reacted if they won and how they reacted if they lost. Because when they don't know you're watching them, they can do things very differently. So when you talk about character, being able to see that same grace in losing, even if they should have won, that kind of puts that person, a notch above in my book. And so just accumulating that information and then, bringing it back to the executive team when they recommend people, it's like, you're right. You know what? This person is amazing. And they got shafted a number of times, but they really could, if they came on the team, they could be even better and would be even better because this team elevates people. And that goes back to that, what Kalena had said earlier is you always teach someone to be better at their job or their skill. You can't teach them to be a better person. And so the beautiful thing that this team has is we may not have always picked the best at the top of their game at that point in time, but we picked the best one that we knew could and would be stronger and better, and they had so much more potential that Team Paul Mitchell could bring out. And we've done that a number of times. And honestly, Jackson, I remember, earlier in the conversation we were talking about all, how successful Team Paul Mitchell has been, yada, yada, yada. You're right. We've been very successful, but there was a number of years where we were not successful. And honestly, and Chris can attest to this, because we picked on skill and not on character. And there was a long, hard lesson that we learned, because when you pick on skill and not on character, long term, it can do more damage than good. And, we found that out. And what we did as a team, though, is as a team, when we elected to once again go after character and not skill, we were okay being number 2 for a while. Because being number 2 allowed us to build back into being number 1, rather than causing disharmony in the team and the team falling apart.
Absolutely. And that's a huge contribution to our longevity. And that's something that, I want our viewers to understand is that, any professional sports team goes through dark ages, if you will, right? Rebuilding processes where, either person X, Y, and Z that were really good retires, or there's some type of falling out or controversy or whatever the case may be. That's a normal part of any sports business. You're going to have rebuilding periods. So now just kind of wrapping it up, maybe Chris, some of your thoughts as well? Or Julie, if you had something else, I think I heard you in there.
No, Chris, by all means.
Yeah, no, I think, Jackson, one of the things when Julie said, how do you remember that? 2 things came to my mind. Number 1 is, well, he goes to Stanford, or he's just graduated.
Sucks to be an underachiever.
That was my first thought. Of course he has a photographic memory. Second thought that I had is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jackson, you're as big a fan of sport karate as you are a competitor of sport karate.
Absolutely. Give it just 1 second, guys. I know we've got listeners here right now. If they can hear me, that's great. We're going through what sounds like a little bit of a freezing up with the FaceTime call right now, so I'm going to give it just a minute, see if that improves. Can you guys hear me okay on the other side?
Yes.
I can hear you fine.
All right, go ahead and continue, Chris. Sorry about that.
All right. So, can you imagine being as big a fan as I am of sport karate, and this is my absolute passion and what I've devoted a large portion of my adult life to, and now my direct report is Kalena, and I get to walk around the auditorium now with this girl that asks 8,000 questions, and not asking 8,000 questions from a place of being a nag, like from a pure, just wonderful curiosity and just a want to learn as much information about our sport as she possibly can. Like, I'm walking around like a kid in a candy store. And, when you talk about enthusiasm, it's so important. You can't teach somebody to love sports marketing or sport karate. You either have it or you don't, and she just has it in spades. And it's, I think it's so awesome. And as I look out, into our future, I'm so excited to have her as the leader of the team. I also think she's very curious. She's asking a lot of questions. I also think she's answering your question, quite humbly as well, because there's nothing that the executive team would do without clearing it through her first. I mean, she is our boss. So, that guidance, that direction, that, I look at Kalena's, job that she does very well, as she aligns us with, the principles of Paul Mitchell and the culture, so that we can be, in years to come, that great representation of what John Paul, has spent the last 40 years of his life devoted to.
Absolutely. So now and by the way, for our listeners here, Kalena is definitely being humble, but one thing that I do want you guys to extract from this, I'll just put it on a silver platter for you, is that even though Kalena refuses to consider herself a scout, quote unquote, impressing the person that connects us directly to the company is never a bad thing. So if you do good forms in front of Kalena, that's probably a good idea. But also to what Kalena and Julie both mentioned, is it's about, your character outside of the ring. How do you handle wins? How do you handle losses? Those things things are of the utmost important because, as they said, Paul Mitchell heavily recruits based on character. Obviously, you have to have talent. It's got to be there, but character is more important than anything else. And so now I want to go another one for all of you. Just a couple of more questions here. Our penultimate question, just each of you in whatever order, your favorite sport karate memory. So in your experience with the sport karate world, favorite memory in relation to Team Paul Mitchell, of course, for Chris. But go ahead.
Well, my best friends in the world are from Team Paul Mitchell Karate, and Team Paul Mitchell Karate is a fraternity and it's a sorority, and it's something that's very, very, very special to me. So these people that I love, I've laughed with, I've cried with, I've bled with, etc. If pressed to say, that magic moment that I was a part of was when we beat Trans World Oil at the Palace of Auburn Hills on TV, because I think that, it was a 5-person team, and at that point in time, Trans World, Atlantic, whatever you want to call them, they were the superpower, and probably still remain the single, at that moment. But if you looked across all history, because they had Kevin Thompson and our later players, that was probably the greatest team ever assembled. But that win on TV at such a prestigious place, that's really what brought Team Paul Mitchell from a regional team to national exposure. So to be one of 5 players that made that happen is, it would be difficult to, that has to at least be in the top 3 for me.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, just very quickly, do you want to give us those 5 members, that full lineup? Because I think Coach Steve was also in that lineup.
Yeah, it was myself, Steve Babcock, Alberto Montron, Roy Xavier, and John Payton. I forgot my best friend, John Payton.
Another JP.
Yeah, another JP. So and if you look at that, I mean, that was a pretty stacked team as well, and but again, it was something that was never really done, and at a point in time when they were the pinnacle, and for a regional team to come out and do that and beat them, at that time so decisively, I think it was 17-7 if I remember correctly. It was quite a win.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Julie, Kalena?
Okay, well, I'm going to go next because I got a couple of, and crashing the Latin Film Festival in Rhode Island with the Venezuelan team and Emily Cooper and dancing the salsa that night. Honestly, my favorite memory would be the truth is taking everything beautiful that has been built in sport karate between fighting and forms and really showcasing it on ESPN with Mike McCoy and Mike Sawyer, with everything that has been done with the US Open. That has been a labor of love for so long, and this, whatever happens, throughout to get people on stage or not, when it comes to the television show, the fact that we were able to actually get this incredibly beautiful sport on television, and not just like some random cable channel, but ESPN, that made it credible, which they played over and over and over and over again. That was to me, one of the biggest accomplishments that I was able to help make happen. And of course, you're sponsoring the show, but also like 3/4 of the show is your team members, competing, made me incredibly proud of just how far the sport had gone in those, 10, 15 years, 20 years that when we were building it up. That truly has to be something that I'm incredibly, incredibly proud of, and so happy to see the sport get the visibility and the recognition that it deserved.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And then Kalena?
I'm not a parent, but when you asked that question, I felt like this is like asking what child is a parent's favorite. It's just really enjoyed hearing what Chris and Julie have had to share. I've favorite moments, a number stick out. Something that popped into my head is seeing how JPM team members react when they don't win, and they should have. And I'm saying that they should have because that's my opinion. We could have a whole separate podcast on, sport karate judging. But, seeing how our team members react, and then maybe they didn't win that division, but 20 minutes later, they're back in the ring and they stomp that next routine and they win. And it's not always about the W, but it is about what they do with that loss and how they deal with it. And every single one of our team members, they smile right after they get their scores, but they have a smile on their face a few minutes later and they just go and take care of their job in the next division. That's just kind of an overarching. Jake Presley's traditional weapons routine will always just stick in my brain. That will always be a beautiful thing to watch. Mm-hmm. And I love our team meetings. This is a difficult question. But having John Paul come to the 30th anniversary in Vegas at the Super Show for Century Martial Arts and that breakfast together and watching, he brought Eloise with him. And I remember standing with JP and Eloise watching as you and the rest of the team did the demo on the mats, and there's Eloise is grabbing my arm like, oh my gosh, did you see that? Holy smokes. And she's got her phone out, she's taking videos and she's posting it on social, and it's just to see our leaders that excited as they always are when they get to see you guys in person. It's a real treat to witness that. And then just touching on something Jules mentioned, that ESPN show, the US Open, is a big deal. Media getting this sport the visibility it deserves, because you guys are incredible. You're magicians. What you guys do is insane. And television was the medium, late 80s, early 90s, that was really popular. This digital wave, this technology of social media, these platforms, I'm really excited what we can do moving forward. Yes, we still have ESPN and television, but man, oh man, you can increase visibility and viewership for this sport socially, digitally. So I'm just looking forward to what else we can do with that. I have so many more favorite memories, but I could keep going on forever, but I'll stop at that.
Awesome. And thank you all for sharing those. So kind of as a segue into the last question, I wanted to, I planned my favorite sport karate memory. So I had this prepped before. My favorite sport karate memory as it relates to Paul Mitchell was, I don't remember what year it was, but it was at Ocean States, and it was one of the years that Kevin was still able to attend. And, I for several years before that, when Kevin had been able to attend after his diagnosis, and I had kind of started a more personal relationship with Kevin, I had dedicated a few forms to him, given him the trophy afterwards, and me doing that was well documented. But this form in particular, I believe it was the last Ocean States that he was physically able to attend. And I remember that particular season, at the end of my musical weapons form, I had upgraded one of my signature moves where I catch the bow on my finger and normally just kind of bring it across the front. I had upgraded that to include an extra spin of the bow over my head that gave me a little bit more downtime in the form. And it wasn't something that I planned on beforehand. It was something that just kind of happened as I was going into the move. I just kind of had the idea, and my gut told me to do it, and I went for it. But I actually drew out that spin over my head a little bit longer so that with my offhand, my left hand, I could actually point and gesture to Kevin. And it wasn't just that personal moment between Kevin and I and making eye contact as I was mid-performance, but the eruption from the side of the stage where our entire team was, as they always are at Ocean States, that stage left is where all of Paul Mitchell always gathers for everybody's forms at our home tournament, Ocean State Grand Nationals. And the overwhelming support and love that I felt from our team in that moment is the best feeling that I have felt being a member of Paul Mitchell. And it brings me to what I'm most thankful for about Paul Mitchell, and that is the sense of family and camaraderie and love that our team members have for one another. The individual experiences that I've had with everybody that's been on our team while I've been on the team. that's the thing that is most impactful and that I care most about. So to wrap things up, just from each of you, a few sentences, what are you most thankful for about Team Paul Mitchell Karate?
Okay, this is me. Again, Jackson, you have such a phenomenal relationship with everyone on the team, and I've loved watching your relationship with Kevin. And extraordinary man, and we were so blessed to have him for as long as we did. And everyone who contributed to spending time and communicating with him, that's what family is about. And I think the biggest thing that we have, it's the tie that binds us all together, and it's the thing that makes us so unique and so different from any other team out there. We're really not a team, we're just a family. And whether it's Matt Emig or Mike Chat or Anthony DeMarco from so long ago, I think everyone is really proud to say they have been a part of Team Paul Mitchell, but not because we were a great team. It's because we were a beautiful, loving family. And we care about everybody, heart and soul, to this day. From 33 years ago to this day, we truly care about how that competitor on our team is doing. And I just think that's the difference, and that's what makes what we do and who we are so incredibly special.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Chris, Kalena, additional thoughts?
Jackson, another tough one to answer. I grew up playing volleyball. That's where my heart and soul was dedicated to volleyball, basically from age 8 until 22. And that was my world. That's what I knew. Every day I was training and practicing and competing and that space. And then I graduated college, got my job at JPMS, and started working on all these different sports programs. Like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, Julie held the karate events close to her chest. She was always the one going to those events, and so I was handling all the other fun stuff we were doing. And when her job shifted within the company and I started going to the tournaments and filling in for her, my eyes were opened up to a whole new world that I knew existed, but I didn't understand it. And so walking into these karate tournaments, my eyes are wide open, my jaw's on the floor, and I'm like a kid in a candy store just running around because I get to be loud and cheer and scream, and that's just that enthusiasm is infectious, from your performances. And so I'm just really thankful for the chance to be a part of sport karate and Team Paul Mitchell Karate. It's because of JPMS sponsoring a team that I'm a part of this family and feel such love and gratitude and enthusiasm watching you guys perform. It's just a world I never would have been exposed to or open to, but I understand the love and the passion and the dedication that go into it because that's what I had to do and take and have for volleyball. And now it's just shifted to a new passion. I'm not competing, but I cheer like I'm competing. But I'm just grateful. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be a part of sport karate and the team.
I couldn't agree more. That's awesome. And then, Chris, if you want to close us out with any additional thoughts, what you're thankful for?
Well, first I would like to say that if you haven't, she says, well, I don't do this. Kalena hits like a mule.
Oh, yeah,
She's been doing kickboxing for 18 years now. And and don't let her think, I don't do this stuff. She hits like a mule. There's a lot I could say, but going back to the we not me. So Jackson, let me ask you the question. You've won, if not, you're fast approaching if you're not there yet, the winningest, forms competitor on our team of all time.
Any team on all time.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. All of those personal achievements that you've won they're just amazing. But I think if I asked you, okay, Jackson, you can have one or the other. 10 years from now or 20 years from now, you can tell someone all the tournaments you won, or you can tell them you were a part of Team Paul Mitchell. What would you choose?
Paul Mitchell, without a doubt, because and just to elaborate on that a little bit, because it's more than just that's the answer I'm giving because I'm talking to you guys right now, but it's two things. Number one, I feel like that level of prestige is communicated simply by being a part of the Paul Mitchell legacy. So from stage one, if I just say that I made it on that team, then everybody knows that I had to have accomplished something great to be able to be there. But the second thing, and this is going back to something that I said earlier, is that to me, even now, if I had been competing to win, 14 U.S. Open titles and to win 7 Warrior Cups and to win 6 Diamond Ring, if that had been what I was competing for, I would have quit years ago. Like that's not what I was ever in it for. I was in it to create a legacy. I was in it to create something that could be remembered. I was in it even from day one when I went to my first U.S. Open and I watched Paul Mitchell members and I looked at my dad and I said, one day I'm going to win, but I'm going to win for that team. My entire mission was to be a representation of what Paul Mitchell was. So for me, it's not my wins that define me or anything like that. It is this team that defined me, because it's this team that is what inspired me to be able to do any of those things, because everything that I do is for this team. I never set out saying I want X amount of this and that. I set out saying that's who I want to win for. And to me, that's why, without a doubt, the answer is Paul Mitchell.
Yeah, and which is, so for me, that's what it is. It's not even a question in my mind if that choice was given to me, because there's such a level of pride. I love everybody, in sport karate. I have some great friends and people that I have tremendous respect for, that not because they're not good enough to be on our team and not because they don't have the kind of character or anything like that. They were just, at the particular time they shined, we already had a spot on the team filled. But to be a part of this legacy, the gold standard, that's when now to be in a position to be able to contribute back to it and ensure its legacy is just a thrill of my life.
Absolutely. And I want to thank all of you for sharing everything throughout the entire course of the podcast. Not only has this been great for me, to the listeners, I learned some things tonight that I didn't know before about the team, and I thought that I knew just about everything about the team. So I really appreciate you guys, Julie, Kalena, and Chris, spending the time to kind of share some of these experiences with our listeners, who consist of competitors that want to join our team one day and parents that want their kids to be on our team one day. And it's something truly special that I hope that everybody respects when they listen to this, is the opportunity to hear some of the things that you've been hearing from these individuals that mean so much to me here tonight. So if you guys don't have any additional thoughts, I'll let somebody jump in if they want to with just a closing comment. But I am going to mute you guys and then kind of wrap up the podcast. But stay on the line because I do want to talk to you guys a little bit after. Are there any final comments that anybody wanted to give, or are we good?
Yeah, Jackson, this is Julie again. And I just have to, reiterate, because what you've talked about so beautifully is that being on the team, and it's not about a legacy of winning. It never has been about a legacy of winning. We are fortunate to have won. It's about a legacy of when you win, what you give back. Is what defines being on Team Paul Mitchell, is sharing your success. Again, success unshared is failure. It's what we do. When we win, it's what we do with that.
That's beautiful. And I couldn't agree more. That's, again, like ever since I got on the team and I was shown more intimately what it meant to be a Paul Mitchell member, and that spirit of giving that you're talking about, that is a big part of why I do what I do after a lot of tournaments. I see a lot of people, because I've been very blessed to be successful. And so, I've been blessed to win a lot of tournaments that I go to. And one thing that seems to surprise a lot of people is I have a habit of, whenever I come off stage after winning an event, I very typically will, whatever kid I see first or somebody in the audience is who actually takes home that trophy from me winning that grand championship. And it's more than just because, I don't want to deal with taking it on the airplane and want to look like the good guy and all that. It's more so because every kid that I've ever done that to, I hear something back from. Whether it's the parent messaging me or whether it's even several years later, the kid messaging me and saying, hey, I won my first grand championship at my regional tournament today, and I wanted you to know that, that time that you gave me that trophy that I don't even remember anymore. You know what I mean? That's what inspired them to do it. And I know how much of an impact it had on me to not even have a moment like that, but just to watch Paul Mitchell competitors do their thing without even having that personal of an experience with any of them beforehand, other than obviously being trained by Lauren Carney and having that special opportunity. But in terms of like somebody, like giving me a trophy and like lifting me up like that, it never happened from a Paul Mitchell member in that way. But that's kind of the way that I have, that I've chosen to kind of carry on that legacy and try to teach somebody new something every time that I am blessed to be able to get one of those wins. But anyway, I'm going off on a tangent, but yes, thank you for sharing that thought too. Anything else?
Thank you for asking us to be a part of this. It's been an honor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, thank you guys very much. I really appreciate your time. I am going to go ahead and put you guys on mute and close out the podcast. Like I said, please stay on for just a few more minutes. So you guys won't be able to hear them anymore, but I just wanted to speak to you guys directly for a minute or so and just say thank you all for tuning in. Like I said earlier, please listen to what these three incredible individuals have said, because it's truly a unique look into what it means to be a member of Team Paul Mitchell Karate, what the mission is of both Paul Mitchell, the company, and Paul Mitchell as the karate team. And I'm extremely grateful to Chris, Julie, and Kalena for sharing that with us. So thank you guys all very much as always for tuning in. If you have any questions, I'll be active in the comment section down below if you guys want clarification on anything else. So feel free to drop that down in the comments. If you enjoy the podcast, please share it for me. And thank you so much for tuning in as always. I'm Jackson Rudolph signing off of episode 17 of the Jackson Rudolph podcast. I'll catch you next time.